Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? It is Tuesday, December. Yeah, sure. Okay, goodbye, everybody. It's the end of the year. Happy New Year. My show is over. I'm going into tape segments. It is Tuesday, April 18th, 2017. It doesn't feel like December. Doesn't look like December. No letters in common with December. The R, I guess. Anyway, I don't know what brought that on, but I guess I wish it was December. We would be that much closer to, I guess, being done with Donald Trump. Whether by hook or by crook, we shall be rid of him. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Bill reminds us all the way from Portland, Maine. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. Hi, how you doing? I'm the guy messing up the intro. David Waldman doesn't meet with Chinese president, doesn't get trademarks. Coincidence? I leave it up to you. That's the most fascinating story in my view this morning. Doesn't change very much, but it's worth noting, as many people are doing. Let's see, is it the... no, that's not the one from Washington Post. I told you, those Washington Post stories don't save right in pocket anymore. No, here it is. I saw it tweeted this morning, or put most succinctly anyway, by Brad Jaffe, who does a fantastic job. Seems to make my morning lineup every morning. We're in sync, you and me. NBC News, it's like I'm writing NBC News, except what it really is I'm reading NBC News and saying, why can't I do this? I'm not. I'm running around delivering the kids to bus stops instead. So I let Brad do it for me. Brad says Ivanka Trump's company won Chinese approval for new trademarks the very same day, as a matter of fact, that she dined with China's president at Mar-a-Lago. What a coincidence. I don't know how it happened that way. So surprising. That must have been a hell of a chocolate cake, though. And as I said this morning, I'm surprised that the Chinese didn't grant a trademark on that. It soothed the Chinese president's frazzled nerves with respect to the launch of 59 cruise missiles into Syria. And I guess it also convinced him to hand over, I think the number is 3, new trademarks for Ivanka Trump's company, which she totally doesn't run anymore anyway, because now she's in government and she's totally divested except for owning and controlling the entire company. Anyway, aside from that stuff, I don't see any reason for concern. The AP has the actual and factual story. Ivanka's biz prospers as politics mixes with business. In other words, it's everything you feared about the lack of divestiture in the Trump companies, both for Donald Trump, who also, by the way, won a raft of trademarks from China earlier this year, and for Ivanka as well. So you remember how the whole election campaign went? I don't know if you paid attention to him on China, but why, they're a bunch of dirty, rotten currency manipulators. They come here to the United States. I'll serve him a Big Mac for dinner. No fancy state dinner for this guy. A Big Mac, and you'll like it, too. And we'll sit down and we will work this out. I will tell him to his face that he's a currency manipulator. Well, Mr. Trump, as it happens, I brought you a gift. 3 brand new trademarks for your daughter's company. Fantastic, wonderful. How about an aged, delicious, dry-aged steak from, well, somewhere other than Trump steaks? You can even cook it some way other than the way I like it. And how about this? The most beautiful chocolate cake you've ever seen in your life. And I just have to tell you, I also launched 59 cruise missiles into China. I mean, the trademark office. I mean, Syria. Well, just in time. Right? So it all works out. And, by the way, after this delicious cake, would you do me a favor and teach me about Korea? I'd like you to set policy for this country. I mean, not China. I mean, this country. That would be really terrific, because I don't know anything about, what do you call it? Vietnam. The other one. The first one from MASH. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Korea? That's the one. Kim Il, one of the Kims. This gentleman. I see that's another interesting take he's got. Now that he can't remember who actually is the leader of the country we might go to nuclear war with. Can't remember his name. He knows it's a Kim, and there's a song or something like that. Anyway, it's really ridiculous. It's like a banana republic over there. There's like the father, and he the son inherits the whole country. It's crazy. I don't understand the way they do their business over there. It's really ridiculous. I'm so glad we're not so crazy over here. Anyway, how about those? Would you please pass the trademarks? I mean the salt. I'm just dropping some subtle hints. I wonder if you're picking up on them. They're in English, and I know you know speaky. Yeah, what a jackass. Anyway, what can I tell you? That's what happened over dinner that's exactly it. That was a transcript of the dinner with China. Perfectly done. I think that's exactly how it went. Like I said, it must have been a hell of a cake to talk them into all that stuff. The Chinese are no fools. They know how to do business with Donald Trump. Who did I see tweet this today? I'll have to look this one up in order to credit it properly, but I happily retweeted it in the morning rush. But the comment was along the lines of, if the North Koreans, if this gentleman, Kim Jong-un, if he wants to avert nuclear war, he'd better get going on a Trump hotel deal. I agree. Well put. As a matter of fact, it is Rob Schooley, who is and tweeting from his personal account. I understand he has two. And he's like, this is one of those fun accounts where it turns out that the person has got a media career all of their own, but they have a media career Twitter account and then a personal Twitter account. And I know we've probably used his, or I know I've seen the tweets before. I really enjoy following the account. Have I ever read one of his tweets on the air? Robert Schooley, as it turns out, I knew him first as a fun Twitter account who was nice to talk to about notes in the news. And then I noticed that a blue check mark appeared one day after his name. And I said, wow, okay, who's that? I didn't even have any idea. And he's got an IMDb link. And it tells me he is known for his work on The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, Sky High, and Kim Possible. I know about Lion King 2. I saw Lion King 1. I don't think I saw Lion King 2. Kim Possible, I know all about. The kids watch all those cartoons. And also a producer of one of their favorite television series, The Penguins of Madagascar, as it turns out. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, for me, he's best known as the guy who just made a great joke about North Korea and Donald Trump. So there you have it. Anyway, we'll clear that one out of the way and make the rounds today. Of course, today being Tuesday, we do not have the regular morning crutch to be able to lean on with Greg Dworkin's roundup of headlines live on the air. However, we can check in with the front page over at Daily Kos. Did he do the roundup today? No. Georgia did the roundup today, but she often, I like the way she puts together these headlines. It's a nice visual each time she takes over these things. Trump won't release his 2016 taxes, it seems, according to the headline, still hiding behind the bogus audit excuse. And by the way, I encourage you all to take this tack. I like this one, with respect to the audit and the taxes. And I probably mentioned it yesterday, but you should find some variant with which you're comfortable. I really don't I think we could probably put a stop to the progress, if there is any, of the proposed Trump tax reform bills. I mean, it's not in bill form yet, and he may not even be writing it. It might just be a congressional effort that he puts his name on and destroys, like the healthcare thing. But there's no real reason that we should accept a tax reform package from a guy who's supposedly under audit. I mean, what do we know about Trump? He'll just change the part of the tax code that he's in trouble for and say, I was right all along. This isn't even illegal anymore. You should let me go. Somebody did, I put that out there on Twitter yesterday. Is there any real reason why you should allow the guy who is under suspicion for tax evasion to rewrite the parts of the tax code he's suspected by some of violating? Of course, he's not really under audit, or if he is, it wouldn't matter. But it doesn't make any sense to me to say, keep the guy's taxes a secret, let him claim to be under audit, and let him tinker with the tax code while he's under audit. I mean, like arrest the guy for murder, you're on trial. Would you like to sit on the jury? I mean, you're here already. We have the chairs. Maybe you'd just like to take a seat. That can't be allowed. And somebody objected, partially correctly, that, he can't change the laws ex post facto. Of course, it's a little bit of a gray area here. There's no factos to work with right now because he's supposedly under audit. But when it comes to tax law, retroactive changes are made to the tax law all the time, especially if you're going to knock down somebody's tax bill. I mean, it's just not an issue with the tax code. People get upset and protest when you retroactively change the tax code in ways that raise their back taxes. But it's something they get away with, legally speaking, all the time. And there's no grounds for challenge if it lowers your tax bill. So, I don't know. Seems to me like that's not the person you would want rewriting the tax code. Somebody who's in trouble, supposedly, under the tax code. And it comes down to this. Either show us the tax returns and let us know that you're clean or that you've cleaned things up anyway. Not that anybody could or should trust you at this point. But it's either you're allowed to reform taxes or you're just going to have to wait until we get to see yours. There's no chance we should be letting somebody whose taxes are secret rewrite the tax code. I thought that was basic and obvious and was the real reason why everybody was in on the notion that he ought to reveal his tax returns. But I guess that part hasn't sunk in quite yet for absolutely everybody. All right, well, let's see. So I wanted to get that one out of the way. There's a number of other things we've got to pick up on here. Let's see. We could go any number of directions here. So many things going on. Let's see. Oh, I forgot yesterday, I think, to send Scott I don't know whether I sent him the link to the story about how Donald Trump demanded to ride in the golden carriage when he visits the UK. But I assume that you all have seen that story somewhere. But it just occurred to me. I put it in Pocket so I could make sure. I don't know. Can I do this retroactively? They changed the tax code. They should allow me to put links in retroactively. Okay. Let's see. Other things that I thought we should touch on. Oh, yes. Before we leave the taxes and audit story, this was an interesting piece of information that I thought we should perhaps insert into this thing. As I was beginning to formulate the idea of, maybe a president who says he's under audit should not be allowed to tinker with the tax code. Well, I have this wrinkle. Thanks to the McClatchy D.C. Bureau, Kevin Hall and Greg Gordon writing this piece. Thanks to Nixon, I said thanks to them, but really thanks to Nixon. Thanks to Nixon, President Trump's taxes will be audited automatically every year. So, if you have the rule be that a president whose taxes are being audited cannot reform the tax code during that audit, well, that'll just prevent any sitting president from revising the tax code. And maybe that's not a terrible thing. But I think in the case of President Trump, I could say, all right, if you're under routine audit because you're president, fine. That I'll give you a pass on. If you're supposedly under audit because you were a tax evader before you became president and we were checking that out, well, that one you don't get a pass on. Anyway, it's an interesting bit of information. Let's just sort of read through that bit and make sure we have the full background on that. This is, I think, something I didn't know, and something I'm glad to walk away from today's show with. And believe me, I'm still happy to walk away from today's show. I'm not yet committed to finishing this whole thing. When Donald Trump is sworn in as the nation's 45th president, this, of course, appears to be an older article, I guess just recirculated yesterday in the wake of the discussion. This is a November 29th, 2016 piece. So when he's sworn in, and I know even in November 29th we couldn't believe that he would be sworn in, but he was, his complex business empire will immediately be subject to an audit by the Internal Revenue Service. Did you know that? So now he's not, this is fantastic. So now he's not lying anymore. I'm under audit by the IRS. You are? Really? Why? Well, everybody is. I mean, all presidents are under audit automatically by the IRS. Has nothing to do with my prior taxes, but the point is I want to be able to say I'm being audited, and so therefore I can't, I'm being audited on subject B. Therefore, I cannot release to you information about subject A because there's an audit on B. But I want you to think the audit is on A. Anyway, thanks to an obscure provision in the IRS manual, and it is linked herein if you want to read it for yourself, Trump and his vice president, who is Mike Pence, by the way, I don't know if anybody remembers that, yeah, he's still there. They will both be under mandatory audit annually. The requirement for mandatory audits of the tax returns of the president and vice president dates back to, you'll never guess, the Watergate era in the 1970s. The IRS said in a statement to McClatchy, noting that nonpartisan career employees adopted the requirement. Since then, this provision has remained in place during both Republican and Democratic administrations, as well as under IRS commissioners appointed by both parties. The little-known provision of the IRS in the IRS manual spells out strict rules under which the returns are audited. We'll see how strict they are in applying them this time around. They require expeditious processing, so it'll be over quickly. That's good. And unusual security precautions. For example, the returns, quote, should be kept in an orange folder at all times. Wow. Well, no wonder. Because, as you know, criminals can't see orange. It's a genetic thing, and kept in an orange folder? Is that so you don't lose the folder? Is that really a security issue? Or are the orange folders booby-trapped in some way? Okay. Well, that doesn't seem to really clarify the picture for me, but what do I know? I don't work at McClatchy. Maybe it's natural to them. Those audits, it adds, must be completed at the Baltimore Technical Services Office of the IRS. Wow, the Baltimore. Oh, okay. They must be kept out of view of other IRS employees and locked, there we go, quote, in a secure drawer or cabinet when the examiner is away from the work area. And let me tell you, the desk has to be purple. I don't know why the orange folder so far. That's not really super interesting to me. Okay. It's unlikely that Trump's tax returns will fit in a drawer or cabinet, though. In October 2015, he tweeted a photo of himself next to a tall stack of papers he said were his tax returns. Good note there. It said they were his tax returns. I don't have any reason to believe that they are. It's an easy thing to guess if it's hinted to you that Donald Trump's taxes would be a gigantic stack of paper. But I don't really know that they are. Certainly not that big. And he's pulled the blank sheets of paper thing on us before, too. I don't know. Mine has a lot of paper, so I assume his does, too. His financial disclosure forms filed with the Federal Election Commission list 584 companies on which he is a director or officer, not to mention his investment holdings. Portions of Trump tax returns leaked during the presidential campaign showed that much of his business income flows through to his individual tax return. I have no doubt that he's funneling as much cash as he can into his own pockets. By the way, of course, you'll know from Well, just knowing Donald Trump and his ways and having listened to the show for however long, thanks very much, you'll know likely the 584 companies are, if he owns 123 Sesame Street, he owns it as, 123 Sesame Street LLC 1, but he also probably owns a 123 Sesame Street LLC 2 and 3 and 4 and 584 as well. It's not as impressive as all that. Let's see. It means that Trump's tax filing as president will likely look much different than, say, President Barack Obama's modest IRS audited 38-page tax return. For the 2014 tax year, it listed wage income of almost $395,000 and business income of $88,181. Changes to tax law in 1998 made it illegal for members of the executive branch to interfere with an ongoing audit. That's how he can't close this one down. But the presidential audit provision in the IRS tax manual is an internal requirement. Oh, okay. It does not stem from a law that mandated a corresponding regulation. Trump could challenge the requirement or direct his Treasury Secretary overseeing the IRS to seek changes to the long-standing practice. I don't believe there is anything that would prevent the president from instructing that this precautionary measure of the IRS audits be rescinded, said Norman Eisen, who, as special counsel to the Obama White House during the first term, put in place new ethics guidelines. He could theoretically do it. If the IRS audits Trump and finds an issue, it would remain between the IRS and him unless it reflected criminal activity. Well, of course, it would. I say. This would be like the back and forth of any other ordinary audit between a taxpayer and the agency. Trump could use the automatic audit as an explanation for continuing to refuse to release his tax returns to the public. They got that right. Being under audit was his main reason during the campaign, though there is no legal reason he could not release them even while an audit is in progress. Presidents before Trump have routinely released their tax returns after the IRS audit, but it's not required. Trump could simply say that the IRS knows everything, and given his business interests across the globe, he'd prefer to keep it private. The returns are protected by law, said Joe Thorndike, a tax historian who runs the website taxhistory.org and has tracked 4 decades of tax returns of presidential candidates and sitting presidents. He's not required to release anything, so we have to rely on the agency. And that agency is under fire. Congressional Republicans have criticized the agency for allegedly targeting conservatives. Budget cuts by Republicans in Congress have left the IRS facing chronic underfunding, according to a 2013 report from the National Taxpayer Advocate. Lawmakers also have tried to impeach IRS Commissioner John Koskinen, 77, they note, for the record, for some reason. His 5-year term ends on November 12th, 2017, but he could resign before then to give Trump a chance to put in his own person. Don't know what the point of that would be, but he could. Interference with the IRS is unlikely, said Mark W. Everson, George W. Bush's IRS commissioner from 2003 to 2007. People have learned the hard way. You can't reach in, said Everson. Well, people have learned, just not Donald Trump. Everson's now vice chairman of Alliant Group, a specialty tax advisory for small and mid-sized firms. I operated with total independence in terms of enforcement matters. Of course, you weren't up against Donald Trump. That was a reference, though, to Richard Nixon, whose vice president, Spiro Agnew, resigned in 1973 after pleading guilty to tax evasion. Nixon was audited twice by the IRS, the second time settling with the agency in 1974 and paying $465,000 in back taxes after paying almost none over 3 years. I know a guy who's paid almost none. Nixon made his tax returns public in a bid to quell the outcry, but since then, every U.S. president has released them. Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, is the only president since who didn't release the actual tax forms, offering instead a summary of the taxes he paid on his salary and modest tax deductions. Unless there's an unlawful leak of Trump's tax documents, he faced criminal prosecution for tax fraud, or he chose to release his tax returns. There is little chance the public will know how much Trump pays in taxes or what, if any, tax shelters he uses. That's the only public information that you're going to have on anything, said Michael Sullivan, a former IRS agent specializing in large dollar cases and with Fresh Start Tax in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which represents taxpayers in disputes with the IRS. Thank you for that last tidbit. So in case you're wandering around Fort Lauderdale, Florida in a dispute with the IRS, head to Fresh Start Tax and ask for Michael Sullivan. All right. Let's see. Where were we here? I just saw a comment coming in here. Rare bit of sanity in Florida. A bill to allow guns at colleges and in airports is rejected. Oh, okay. That seems like a surprising outcome for Florida. Crooked Donnie, who is at the Twitter address Verns Lawyer, VERNS Lawyer, but has adopted the handle Crooked Donnie. Let me know that one. Let's take a look at that story. Might as well. I mean, it's right here. Let's see. Stubb's gun bill fails to get a hearing as session winds down. Stubb. All right. The Stubb. I don't know. That's the guy's name. I guess Senator Greg Stubb or Stubbe. I don't know. Steube. If you happen to know offhand, let me know. Stubb or Stubbe. But either one would make a fantastic nickname. Like if your name was Stuart. Stubb. Stubbe. Stubinator. You remember that Rob Schneider bit from old Saturday Night Live? I'm 1,000 years old. And that's not even old. All right. Anyway. His gun bill fails to get a hearing as the session winds down. What was his gun bill? Well, I don't know, but here's a picture of him speaking to the Argus Foundation at the Sarasota Yacht Club earlier this year, so that might tell you something. Senator says it's not over, but it appears to be over, says Zach Anderson, political editor of the Herald Tribune. What Herald Tribune? The Herald Tribune. I don't know. Sarasota International? I'm not really sure. HeraldTribune.com. You know, they never say anymore on these websites. You kids and your news on websites. Let's see. So where were we with this? Just kind of curious about this one. Senate Judiciary Committee, where the gun bills have failed to get a hearing so far, released the agenda for its final meeting. It wasn't on there. Let's see. He's the sponsor of a number of gun bills that aren't getting hearings. This one was to allow concealed weapons on college campuses and in airport public areas. He's also proposed allowing concealed permit holders to openly carry handguns, but none of those bills has been heard in committee after Senator Anitire Flores, Anitire, Anitire Flores, a Miami Republican. Wow, well, there you go. Armando, do you know Senator Flores? Maybe. Miami Republican from a moderate district declared during the session's first week that she opposed many of the controversial gun measures. There you go. She's one of the top-ranking Republicans in the Senate, so I guess she actually has some pull there. Prominent gun rights lobbyist Marion Hammer, I've heard her name before. She's from the Florida Rifle Association, the Florida arm of the National Rifle Association, and a bit of a nut herself. She says, it ain't over till it's over, but like you heard right up at the top, sounds like it's over. Well, good news. And they've had their difficulties in Florida passing the nuttiest gun bills, believe it or not, from time to time. I think the last time the campus carry bill came up, it was defeated again by a Republican state senator who's now, I think, the president of one of the larger universities in Florida. I don't know whether it's Florida State or University of Florida or one of the smaller ones, but he stood in the way that time, a couple of years ago, of a campus carry bill. He was lobbied. He was a big gun rights advocate, but he was lobbied by a friend of his, I think it was his dentist, as a matter of fact, whose daughter had been accidentally shot to death on the campus of, I think, University of, let's look it up. I can kind of sort of remember the name of the student. Was it Ashley Cowie? I've seen this story so many times that the name has kind of stuck with me here. Not that one. Not the Scottish historian, in case you were wondering. Or the... I must have it... Do I have the spelling wrong? I'll have to look it up by... I wonder why that's the name that stuck with me. I wonder if it's totally different. Let's see. There was the... I'll have to Google it. Student... let's see if I can come up with that one. Oh, yeah, it was Florida State. Yeah, Ashley Cowie. I had the name right. It's just, for some reason, I guess if you're a famous person who also has that name, I end up at your Wikipedia page instead. This was back in 2011, early 2011. 2 shot in fraternity house at FSU. Student Ashley Cowie dies. This was, total frat dude. Had brought to his Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. Sorry for those of you who might be members of that chapter or some other chapter who are otherwise fine, upstanding citizens. He decided to bring his rifle to campus and keep it in the fraternity house for lots of good reasons. And then they all got drunk and he shot 2 of them. And wow, if one of them didn't die. Ashley was fatally shot in the chest. Keith Savino struck in the wrist, according to the release from way back when. Cowie was a sophomore from Jacksonville suburb of Orange Park, majoring in interior design, in case you needed to know. The owner of the rifle, a 20-year-old student by the name of Evan Wilhelm, not injured when the shots rang out. Even though the shooting was reported as accidental, Wilhelm was arrested and booked into jail on manslaughter charges. And I don't remember how that case actually worked out. But the bigger point was that the state senator who had the sway at the time was lobbied by Ashley's father, who was a friend, doctor, acquaintance, whatever of his, to bottle this thing up and block it. And it didn't pass. And everybody was up in arms about it. And then he ended up later as president of the college. Was it Florida State that he went on to helm? I can't recall whether that was the case or not. But it's interesting, just a good tidbit to keep in mind, as many of you live in states that might themselves be considering campus carry bills if they haven't already passed them. And every time I see one of these things crop up and the objection is made, there's a lot of drinking and craziness that goes on college campuses. Maybe guns aren't the right mix for this crowd, despite fears of school shootings, which are legitimate to be sure. I don't know if the answer is let's all wait around drunk with a bunch of guns in case that threat arises. Because, as you may know, in 99 out of 100 cases, nobody is going to show up on campus with a loaded weapon intending to shoot any number of people and actually try to carry it out. And then, of course, the likelihood that somebody who is armed on one of these campuses will respond properly without endangering anybody else, I guess, is also a big question mark. But in the meantime, the real problem isn't what will happen if somebody shows up and should there be armed response. That's all well and good. What we can't really quite put our finger on here is what's the risk of waiting around for that to happen with a bunch of drunk students and guns hanging around. Well, the students who are, licensed to carry, well, they'll be the responsible ones because it's so, arduous. It's a real task to get yourself a concealed carry permit. Of course, it's not. And every day it becomes less of an issue. And, forget about the states that now say you'll have constitutional carry. There's no restrictions on getting a gun permit, concealed, open, or otherwise. Plus, we'll allow campus carry. And for that matter, we're not even really good about carding people about, picking up their Bartles and James or whatever the hell whatever the kids drink these days. And, you get incidents like this. Not always this outrageous and tragic, to be sure, but, we've seen a couple of accidental discharges on campuses, usually not all that long after they pass campus carry laws. As a matter of fact, they kind of tend to go hand in hand in that in the first couple of days or weeks or even months that they allow campus carry, people, it's not even that they're going particularly crazy about the guns. It's just they know they're allowed to carry them, so they start doing it. But that's a change in routine. And anytime there's a change in routine with a loaded firearm involved, there's the risk of an accidental discharge. And we do see that very often in the opening weeks of allowing people to carry on campus, they do make exactly that mistake. Thankfully, it hasn't been that tragic, and that's good news. But gun enthusiasts tend to point to that and say, see, there's no problems. But I don't know. These things happen in a matter of weeks. Over time, in enough places, things are going to happen. We just had an incident not that long ago. I don't know if it involved a concealed carry permit holder or not. I think it did, as a matter of fact. Though it happened on a campus where it shouldn't have mattered because you weren't supposed to be armed on campus, concealed carry permit or not. But, your basic nightmare scenario. Thankfully, nobody died, but messing around with a gun in a dorm room and shot through the wall, and somebody minding their own business, probably studying calculus or cooking methamphetamine. It could have been either one of those things for all I know. And they got, hit with I think they only got a grazing, but imagine getting shot through the wall of your dorm room. By the way, what's up with these dorm rooms? When I was a student back in 1820, I don't think you could shoot through a dorm room wall. There we had painted cinder block walls, as I recall. Nothing so flimsy that, your neighbor's 45, powerful though it may be, could shoot through the wall. But, I guess these days, kids with their flat screen TVs, why, what can I tell you? The world's a different place. Anyway, so thank you for pointing that news story out and giving us a tangent to go on this morning. We'll take as many tangents as we can get. Of course, I don't really want to pay attention to the real news. It's just too damn depressing. Okay. Let's see. Wow. Here's a distraction for you. I'll retweet it. This is, I was not expecting this one. It's just, I'll have to open it up and, I'll share it with the rest of you via the post at the end of the day. I'll send this to Scott. Burial, cremation, or option 3. There is a photo here. You tell me where this one comes from, of a hearse, a funeral hearse, towing. I didn't even know they had tow hitches. Oh, it's a Volvo. Look at that. How do you like that? A Volvo modified into a hearse. So that's good because they got casket airbags in the back. You don't want anything happening. I don't know what to tell you, but safest hearse they've got, I guess. Although this one is towing a wood chipper. That's option 3, I guess. Burial, cremation, or option 3. I don't know. You see the strangest things on Twitter in the morning, and gosh, if you didn't have a radio show to tell you about these things, I don't know how you'd make it through your day. I see you're all enjoying that one too. That's quite an oddball story, to say the least. All right, back to the real news though here, if we could. What direction to go? I don't know. We'll start with the most recent thing I put in pocket. How about that? That's as reasonable as anything. This one struck me yesterday. And I don't mean struck me. I was just metaphorically speaking as having struck me, because it's a story about striking people. I mentioned to you that over the weekend there was the protest and counter-protest, which really amounted to a gang fight in Berkeley, California. The local anarchists, using the occasion of the Trump protest for tax day, to join in the fight and get some attention, and the alt-right weirdos using the occasion to get their jollies beating people up by showing up and fighting with the anarchists. Anyway, Amanda Marcotte has a story here with a good point to it, and I'll share it with you right now. Pro-Trump rioters got away with beating anti-fascists in Berkeley and likely won't stop there. Now, I guess there's some, I don't know what, some amount of fairness, I guess, to the story. I suppose if the anti-fascists, I guess that's what they're calling themselves now. We knew them as anarchists, but somewhere in the middle there are anti-fascists. I mean, I'm anti-fascist, but I don't know if I would say I'm an anti-fascist. But for all the time that people have spent saying, yes, we should be punching Nazis, I guess it shouldn't surprise us at the very least that Nazis say, well, we should punch you. And that's, I guess, to be expected, although they did go a little bit further past the I will punch you to I will bring a club and a shield and a helmet and somehow get that past security. I was very surprised to find that for once a large-scale assembly in, well, anywhere, really, but in Berkeley, California as well, was, do they not do this in Berkeley because it's Berkeley? I've never seen such a large-scale demonstration not be swarming with cops. And you could be at a peaceful demonstration anywhere in the country and get yourself arrested for stepping off the sidewalk or not stepping on the sidewalk or whatever. Or if you stand still, you can be arrested in some places. But between that and going to a rally somewhere and having them say you can't have a sign on a stick because you might hit somebody with the stick. These people had shields and helmets and face masks. How did they walk through the cop lines in this? So I was a little bit concerned about that one. That seems a little weird. And Amanda Marcotte decided that she ought to write on this. Pro-Trump rioters got away with beating anti-fascists in Berkeley and likely won't stop there. And I guess that's probably right. The subheader, the Berkeley street violence was a great marketing event for alt-right types eager to attack anti-Trump protesters. And it should be pointed out that I guess we're not all that up in arms, I guess, because they spent their time beating up people that a lot of us find annoying. But I think this is supposed to be practice for beating up the rest of us, too. And I think Armanda's trying to make that point, and I think it's a good one. Most of the demonstrations, she begins, held on April 15th, which was set aside by progressives for marches to demand that Donald Trump reveal his tax returns, were peaceful. The notable exception was the city of Berkeley, California, often described as the most liberal community in the nation, where things rapidly descended into a street fight between radical right-wingers and more left-leaning counter-protesters. And, we could fight all day about how we want to characterize the people who are protesting, or the people who are getting beat up by the protesters. And the people who are doing the beating up are a strange mix, by the way. If you look at through the photos, no point in trying to describe them. They're an eclectic bunch, to be sure, but there's some very interesting stereotypes in there, too. Anyway, a group of hard right extremists came to Berkeley, and I'm hearing more and more about how organized that was. They were, very out in the open on social media, planning to do just this. So the fact that this was missed and that they somehow got away with showing up with weapons and beating people and walking out of there is all the more surprising. Unless, of course, you're a cynical bastard and believe that the police essentially participate in these riots by taking sides, which, I don't think you're wrong. I'll just say that. Anyway, let's see. So this group of hard right extremists came to Berkeley to hold a rally in support of Trump while they are, of course, claiming that they only resorted to violence and self-defense. Yes, here we go. It's clear from the social media organizing done ahead of time that their intention was to start a riot. And here a link to the Southern Poverty Law Center's Hate Watch article on the subject and laying it out pretty clearly. Dave Neerwart of the Southern Poverty Law Center, he's there officially, eh? Okay, excellent, wrote in a blog post on social media, the organizers and supporters called it, quote, the next battle of Berkeley, unquote, a chance to gain revenge for an earlier event on the University of California campus that they believed had infringed on conservatives' free speech rights. In February, a scheduled appearance by alt-right provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos was shut down by rock-throwing, quote, anti-fascist protesters. One Twitter user also documented the way that alt-right folks were instructing one another in how to smuggle weapons past police. And some embedded tweets here, collected by Caroline O., who tweets at RVA Wonk, and many of you likely follow her tweets. She says, so it definitely looks like the tweet on the right is providing instructions for making a weapon to get past security at Berkeley. And let's see, the tweet on the left here is, I have to open another thing. Here we go. One, it says, tomorrow is the big day, people. We make our stand against tyranny. We make our mark on history. Please show up early. God is with us. The tweet on the left, or on the right that she's referring to, says, tomorrow is April 15th, and then in all caps, the next Battle of Berkeley. Make sure your based sticks are ready. And then hashtag MAGA, Make America Great Again, MAGA Militia. Follow Commander Kyle. That would be based stickman _ on Twitter. And this is what he's instructing people to put together for the MAGA militia. Pin your flag, bring a flag, to your hashtag based stick for quick action release. Zip tie smaller plastic flag on for quick movement, and for your based stick to always legally be a flagpole. It will stay on better. Then place the flag over your shoulders so it doesn't touch the ground. Then Make America Great Again with smaller, more durable flag on your base. I don't even know what he's babbling about, but the instructions are, if you bring a club to beat up the opposition with, put a flag on it so that they'll let you through and they don't think it's a weapon. And so I guess his hashtag, and in fact his username, is whatever for whatever reason they call that, based stick. Maybe somebody who follows this more closely has some idea why they do that. But basically it's secret smuggling of weapons into rallies disguised as flag poles or whatever. Even though that's not supposed to be allowed either. But okay, I guess they let that go for some reason. So Amanda continues, they wanted a fight, and a fight they got. 11 people were injured and 6 were hospitalized. One white supremacist identified as Nathan D'Amigo, or is it D'Amigo? I don't know. That's the guy who was allegedly clocking in at 4'11" and punching the young woman to whom we referred yesterday. It's tempting to write off this event as something unique to the Berkeley area. The area has a robust anti-fascist, or Antifa, presence, which is the name given to a small group of youthful anarchist leftist sorts who tend to reject nonviolent approaches in favor of aggressive confrontation. I think that would be the sort of person who was originally filmed punching Richard, what's his name, in the face as well. What's the guy's name again? I guess it's best that I don't even bother remembering. But you all know, the video, we all enjoyed so much of the Nazi guy getting punched in the face. That seems to be where the puncher was coming from, this anarchist leftist sort. The white nationalists and fascists knew full well that going to Berkeley meant they would be met with an aggressive response. If they had tried the same stunt in, say, New York, it probably wouldn't have devolved into a violent melee like it did in Berkeley. But while this particular situation might not have happened anywhere else, now that it has, there's good reason to worry that the violence could spread. By staging this street fight in Berkeley, the alt-right sent a message to its sympathizers across the country, encouraging them to start organizing brown shirt efforts of their very own. For one thing, while there were 21 arrests at this particular street fight, most of the right-wing fighters, apparently including D'Amigo, or D'Amigo, you tell me, walked away scot-free and full of pride about this supposed victory, as Mother Jones reporter Shane Bauer recorded on Twitter, and he has a lot of good shots there. You should follow along. Shane _ Bauer, I think, Bauer, if you're still looking. Bauer also obtained video footage of his confronting Berkeley police about not doing more and finding that these cops were largely uninterested in a conversation about their responsibility to shut down political violence. The message that alt-right sympathizers across the country are likely hearing is that this means they can kick the crap out of anti-Trump protesters, even ones who are demonstrating peacefully, and not worry too much about being held accountable by police for their behavior. The fact that Jeff Sessions, Trump's attorney general, has made a showy display out of his utter lack of interest in police accountability only makes this situation more worrisome. Beyond that, the whole debacle is a marketing coup for wannabe brown shirts. White nationalists and other far-right types have been crowing about their, quote, victory on social media, with many portraying themselves as tough and manly for their behavior. That message will have resonance for the alt-right crowd, which primarily consists of youngish men who have a lot of anxiety about manliness and an intense desire to prove their manhood. To drive home the gendered nature of this message, one female militant right-winger was theatrically protected by a group of men helping drive home the message to anxious young men that the best way to prove their manhood is to use violence against Trump's political opponents. As historian Rick Perlstein has pointed out in the Washington Spectator, and it would take me 4 years to read it to you, but it has been pointed out, the amount of online chatter demanding violence against progressives seems to have increased dramatically in the past few months. I'm glad this was summarized so succinctly here by Amanda, because it's true, and I wanted to point it out, but the article was, I've seen a couple articles on it. They're both huge, which is great for documentation, but it's terrible for working into a radio show. But it's important that you know that this is the case. The amount of online chatter demanding violence against progressives seems to have increased dramatically in the past few months. As has been the case with fascist violence in the past, the hard right excuses its calls for violence by citing self-defense. As Perlstein noted, the story that these hard right forces are telling themselves is the left has escalated its resistance to Trump into literal war, so Trump supporters must be prepared to resort to violence to oppose it. And that's a direct quote. Of who, I don't know. I might be quoting Rick Perlstein, paraphrasing them, but I've seen that phrase before. The images from Saturday's melee demonstrate the paper-thin nature of this excuse, especially the video of the new Nazi dude, the short one, D'Amigo, punching an unarmed woman. One of his supporters, conservative commentator Gavin McInnes, defended him by saying the victim's clothing disqualified her as a woman. That's going to go over really huge with Amanda in particular, but every other woman, I think, in the world. But this is the alternative facts era, so the laughable transparency of the self-defense excuse hardly matters to those who spout it. All that matters is that they have some pretext, no matter how thin, for their violent urges, all of which is why there's reason to worry about this violence spreading. The event in Berkeley showed that violence is possible, that most right-wingers who enact it won't face any consequences, and that beating up progressives is a quick and easy way for young alt-right types to gain praise from their fellows. These fledgling brown shirts may have gotten started by beating up antifas, who are an unsympathetic target. Now that they've tasted blood, there's reason to fear they will feel empowered to spread the violence around. Although I must tell you that as I was reading it, I don't know that it's not the case that beating up or punching Nazis, didn't that sort of kind of become a quick and easy way for young left types to gain praise from their fellows? I think it did. Although, you know what? To hell with it. I'll probably still praise it. Punch Nazis. I guess I'm still unchanged by that. But, yeah, it will have consequences. But so does standing idly by for being punched by Nazis. So, or rounded up and killed, for that matter. And they'll come up with an excuse. You know what? March peacefully. They'll still kick you in the head and say you started it. So, whatever. I don't know what to advise you, except that being peaceful about it won't always result in being viewed as having taken the right approach either. All right. Most of us, I think, hope to be able to avoid Nazis entirely, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. All right. I guess we'll just continue on more or less chronologically in order to avoid having to make decisions about which stories to read, because they're all good. If they're in pocket, there's a reason. Meant to mention this one yesterday when we had Greg with us. He may have seen this one too. I just wanted to point this out. A good observation, I think, from David Frum. And I know we're always instructed to take a grain of salt when we're talking about David Frum or any of the people who were primarily known as conservatives before, but have found themselves outspoken Trump opponents, and therefore they've gained a little attention and following from those of us who oppose Trump from the left. But a good point either way here with respect to the Korea situation. Just wanted to throw this out there because I thought it was a good observation. From retweeting one of his own comments and expanding on it, the first comment being him quoting Trump from January of 2016, saying South Korea should pay us, and pay us very substantially for protecting them. Not unlike things he said about Japan, things he said about NATO, which is obsolete, but it was obsolete, but now it isn't obsolete because I said that they should do a thing and then they did it, and so therefore that's good and they're no longer obsolete. This, South Korea should pay us, and pay us very substantially for protecting them, said candidate Trump in 2016. From notes, though, now that he's escalating the confrontation beyond the South Korean government's wishes. Interestingly here, this is put forth where? In the Spokesman Review. Yeah, so how did this get... Did he write this? No. Oh, okay. Well, he just picked it up from the Spokesman Review. It could have been anywhere. It's an AP story. Trump finds Asian allies cool to preemptive North Korea strike. I think most people probably would be. But I guess it's being offered up as proof of his assertion that Trump is now escalating the confrontation beyond the South Korean government's wishes. And I think that's probably true. It's good that he's got a link to prove it. But the larger point here being, if they were to pay us for defending them, that would it would put us in a weird position, but it would, I guess, position us as the service providers and them as the customer. And you can't provide service beyond what the customer is comfortable with. If it's defense services, it's defense services. If it's aggression, they're not going to pay us to poke the North Koreans with a stick and launch a preemptive strike. I would think they would want their money back on that one. Luckily, they haven't been paying us. But I mean, it just goes to show how dumb a theory the whole thing is. They should pay us for protecting us. I get the thing. They should something. Whatever. And I'm not certain that they're not doing it because it might just be grateful to us and be a helpful trade partner. And they are. So I don't know what we expect them to do. Give us money? Well, if they give us money, then you're not allowed to nuke North Korea over their objections. I don't know. I thought that was a good point. I mean, it's a good point about a bad point is the best I can say for it, I guess. Continuing on. Let's see. Here's another story that I think was particularly important. Not necessarily top of the news this morning, but I told you I put these things in pocket because I think I want to share them with you. Darryl Fears, writing in the Washington Post in the Energy and Environment section, for whatever reason, I think this is applicable across the board, but that must be the focus of this. Democrats fear, and they always do, Democrats fear that Trump has barred key federal workers from speaking to them. This is not normal. This, again, another chronicle of the collapse of government under the Trump, quote-unquote, administration. Illustrated with a picture of Representative Raul Grijalva, Democrat of Arizona, who, the caption tells us, said the Department of Interior blocked workers at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from providing documents and other information to his staffers as they sought to prepare for a hearing. They can't perform their oversight function without getting assistance from the agencies. The agencies, I mean, you can sort of understand, and this is, I guess, where Trump comes in. Well, why should we help them oversee us? They're just going to call us out on these things. Why should we help them do that? Well, it's in the interest of running a good government. But I don't have any interest in that. I have an interest in looting it. Well, that's problematic. We're going to have to stop that. But in the meantime, this information is essential to making sure that, you remember when you used to cry, oh, we're so upset about all the taxpayer money that's being wasted. It's waste, fraud, and abuse. If we could just root that out, there'd be so much money left for like missiles and other cakes and beautiful things. But you won't root any of it out. Why is that? Well, I'm stealing it, that's why. Democrats in Congress are accusing the Trump administration of ordering officials in the federal departments and agencies to withhold information that they need to carry out their duties, such as preparing for committee hearings. Party leaders say officials have routinely provided documents and detailed explanations of programs in the past, but now at least 2 ranking Democrats on congressional committees say their staff members were told directly by workers and agencies that they could no longer speak with them. The issue started in January and grew into such a concern that House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi asked Representative John Sarbanes, Democrat of Maryland, to track Democrats' correspondence to the executive branch that have gotten no response. So far, Sarbanes said, there are more than 100 cases from the House. And somewhere in Pocket, there's another piece that I put aside about this. And I don't know whether I'm going to be able to scroll around and find it or not, but increasingly the way that the Trump administration is choosing to deal with inquiries is simply not to answer. It's become policy for the Trump administration. Just don't answer their inquiries, not even in a targeted way, like, if they ask for something that will harm us or that'll make us look bad, then don't give them the information. I mean, that would be an easy enough instruction to give them. But instead, they just say don't give them anything, and I guess that's a better instruction in terms of getting the job of hiding everything done. It doesn't require any thinking or decision-making on behalf of the people on the ground in the agencies. They just simply don't respond to anything. I'm wondering, let me see. See if I can find this thing. Oh, well, here's one of them that had something to do with this. But as I recall, there was a very clear headline that would have set this apart. Again, I got to get better at using the tagging function, such as it is in Pocket. But there's so many stories. There we are. ProPublica, as a matter of fact, with this story. Let me at least open it up so we have it on hand. Oh, I guess I didn't need to open it that way. But their piece from March 30th. How the Trump administration responds to Democrats' demands for information? It doesn't. So let me go back, though, for starters, to the Washington Post story, which, by the way, again, ProPublica had that story on March 30th. This is April 15th, the Washington Post. More or less the same story, I think. We'll see whether there's any deeper angles on the original story, perhaps, later on. But we started with the Washington Post, so we'll finish there, too. So, interesting that Nancy Pelosi has asked someone, John Sarbanes of Maryland, to track the number of times that Democrats ask the agencies for information and they don't respond. So far, over 100 cases just from the House. House Democrats have sent more than 100 letters to the Trump administration seeking answers to urgent questions and received no response, said Ashley Etienne, a spokeswoman for Pelosi's office. If there's a concerted effort by the Trump administration not to respond to House Democrats, we will take appropriate action to address it. What is the appropriate action to address it? Well, I'll get to that. And if I don't, remind me. I'm afraid to break stride just now because it'll occupy the rest of the decade if I do. The Trump administration did not respond to a request from the Washington Post to address the allegations of an apparent gag order I think that would have been funnier to put this way. The Trump administration did not respond to a request from the Washington Post to address the fact that they refused to respond to requests. But at least one administration spokeswoman denied that her department forbids officials to speak to minority party lawmakers. And it may not even be a prohibition. It may simply be there's no one here to respond. But more likely it is the case that no one here cares to respond. I don't care. Oh, Democrats are mad at me? I'll get a promotion in this administration. Although responding to letters from lawmakers in the opposition party is a common courtesy practiced by previous administrations, they don't always respond to every one. Each of the letters Sarbanes shared with the Post were written in March, and some appeared to require time for an adequate response. A few of the letters seemed political in nature, such as the March 2nd letter from Representative Elijah Cummings, also of Maryland, by the way, the ranking Democrat on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, questioning Attorney General Jeff Sessions' communications with the Russian ambassador to the United States and calling on Sessions to resign. I suppose the call for the resignation might have been a little bit political, but what's so political about wondering about his communications with the Russian ambassador? Only Democrats ask that question, but that's not what makes it political. But most sought answers, most of these other 100 letters, sought answers or actions seemingly on behalf of constituents. Representative Tim Ryan of Ohio asked the administration on March 7th to maintain a $9 billion fund to fight opioid and prescription drug abuse in the United States. Representative Keith Ellison, I hate that guy, he's really annoying, from Minnesota, of course, asked Sessions, forget that, to investigate the slayings of transgender women around the country as hate crimes. Well, that wasn't going to get an answer, regardless of, I don't know. It should, but it's Jeff Sessions. Imagine Keith Ellison wants an answer from Jeff Sessions about anything, forget it, and he wants it about the killing of transgender women and prosecuting them as hate crimes. And Jeff Sessions, I hate hate crimes, it's a stupid thing, I hate transgender people of all sorts, that's a stupid thing. I hate Keith Ellison, he's stupid, he's Muslim, he's black. So that wasn't likely to get answered. But a good example for that reason. Representative Annie McLean Custer of New Hampshire asked the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, for information on reports that up to 30,000 Marines were under investigation for sharing and commenting on obscene photos of female Marines. John Garamendi of California and other Democrats in California's delegation called on President Trump to declare a major disaster in the state after storms caused mudslides and overflowing reservoirs. I guess no answer to that one either, which is really, that one's a little bit surprising. Not for Trump, it isn't, but just for normal presidents. It's surprising. Senator Tom Carper of Delaware, the ranking minority member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, released an angry statement after a meeting with officials at the General Services Administration in March. Carper wanted to know whether the use of public land by a Trump hotel in Washington financially benefited the president. Gee whiz, I wonder. At the end of a list of complaints, Carper stated that, quote, I am even more disturbed by the explicit statements made by GSA officials during this briefing that beginning on January 20th, 2017, the Trump administration changed GSA's long-standing practice of providing certain documents requested by minority members of Congress. During the briefing, Carper continued, agency personnel stated that its new practice only assures that such documents will be provided to the committee's chairman. Well, that's going to be great. When Democrats are chairman, they'll change that. Both congressional chambers and their committees are controlled by Republicans, of course, putting Democrats at a disadvantage that did not exist during previous administrations. Raul Grijalva, mentioned earlier, said a similar thing happened when he asked his staff to gather information from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under the Department of Interior last month. Grijalva was stunned when his chief of staff informed him that the staffer tasked with retrieving the information from a congressional liaison office was turned away from the congressional liaison office. Grijalva said he was told that fish and wildlife workers couldn't speak to minority staff unless they were called as a witness at a hearing. I've been on this committee going on my 15th year, Grijalva said. This kind of response is unprecedented. Department of Interior spokeswoman Heather Swift denied that fish and wildlife workers had been silenced. There is no gag order, Swift wrote in an email last week. the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs for both Interior and Fish and Wildlife, has been in regular contact with both the majority and minority staff. They have supplied information for a number of requests, and Interior officials have consistently testified at hearings, including yesterday. Grijalva's office responded that the contact Swift mentioned was personnel who, quote, told us directly that they have been ordered by the office of the secretary not to answer our questions about hearings at which administration witnesses are not present, and they have refused to answer questions. That's interesting. So the contact, that's not true. It's all a lie. There's no gag order. The office is in regular contact with both majority and minority staff. Yeah, to tell us that you won't tell us anything. All I said was contact. Wouldn't that be amazing if that were the case? Without guidance from Fish and Wildlife, Democrats on a Natural Resources subcommittee said they were powerless to refute claims from witnesses called by Republicans who said the Endangered Species Act costs projects millions of dollars as a result of delays. Okay, show me the documentation of the delays. No. Well, how am I supposed to do anything? You're not. You're supposed to lose. Shut up. Representative Rob Bishop, a Republican of Utah, the committee's chairman, said he wants to repeal the act, the Endangered Species Act, that is, that has saved eagles, manatees, condors, and other animals from extinction. His office sent quotes from witnesses at the hearing to media that support the chairman's view that the act slows development. Nearly 100,000 projects had to undergo time-consuming and expensive consultation, even though none of them would likely jeopardize a listed species or its habitat, said Jonathan Wood, a staff attorney for the Pacific Legal Foundation. In many cases, project approval would improve conditions for a threatened species, while also bringing, oh my God, much needed economic development to rural America, said Doug Stiles, general manager of the Hecla Mining Company of Ohio. In other words, their claim is our mining is actually good for eagles. It's fantastic. And it brings much needed economic development to rural America. Eagle hotels, or in fact, eagle hospitals, where they can go after ingesting the heavy metals leached into the groundwater by our mining operation. The point is, gold is a heavy metal. Maybe these eagles will become rich. And that's always a good thing. Oh, you know, pollution's good for animals. By the way, just one short diversion, I guess, here. It occurs to me, my wife is one of the millions of people who have been enjoying watching all sorts of miracles of nature on webcams, including the somewhat disturbing breakfast time birth of a giraffe the other day. You know, miracle of birth and all that, but I mean, it was breakfast time. Anyway, the real issue here, not, you know, giraffe placenta so much as, I'm so phobic about those things. Giraffes only, though. Humans, fantastic. Can't get enough placenta. Giraffe things just drive me up the wall. I don't know what it is. It's those little horns they have on top of their head. They look like aliens. Bothers me. I don't know why they're there. Anyway, it occurs to me that she spent considerably more time watching eagles and eaglets hatching from eggs in urban nests. In fact, in Washington, D.C., I think everybody was entranced by watching the eagles nesting bald eagles, for God's sake. How could you be against that? Hatching in Washington, D.C. And it just sort of occurred to me, you know, the conservative Republican weirdos and Trump supporters and everybody who complain too much regulation of the environment and who cares, and a little bit of smoke or a little bit of mercury never hurt anybody. I think they tend to forget, because it was so long term, how different things are since the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. You know, and I mean, they think, you know, a little bit of garbage gets into water, gets washed away. It's not going to be the end of the world, et cetera, but it's, you know, it's more than that. It's a systemic thing. It's sustained pollution that we're worried about. But I mean, just sort of thinking about things that used to happen in this country in recent memory. Certainly, I mean, in the current memory of, such as it is, of Donald Trump even, he can remember these things because they happened in the 80s, and he still lives in the 80s. But thinking back to the glory days of Ronald Reagan, what about the smog alerts in L.A.? Do we hear about that on the news anymore? I mean, they may still happen. I don't live in L.A. You tell me, do you still have regular smog alerts going on there? We don't hear about it as much. It used to make the East Coast news, though, when you were covered in smog and everybody was dropping dead in the streets or whatever. Now we only hear about it in China. It may be still happening, but it's clearly a lot less. And cleaning up watersheds, the Anacostia River, still not, top condition. A long way to go on the Anacostia watershed, to be sure. But, I mean, that thing was poisoned. Dead. Hudson River, East River in New York. Clearly, Donald Trump's going to be familiar with that. But you never, I mean, when did we have nesting bald eagles in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s glory days? We never did. We were still in the process of cleaning up the environmental disasters that we'd piled on ourselves in the 50s, 60s, 70s when we were ignorant of the effects of all these things. These laws have made it possible for... You're killing bald eagles at this point. What could be better than having three pair of nesting bald eagles, as I understand it, in Washington, D.C.? That never happened. And it never would have happened but for these environmental regulations. But it's important to kill whatever lives in Idaho, I guess, because that's where this guy is from who came as a witness. Who was it? Yeah, from the Hecla Mining Company. Anyway, just a small diversion there that I wanted to put on record since we're all having such fun watching the Eagles. Donald Trump wants to kill them all. But that, you can't blame him because that one eagle that he brought to his desk wanted to kill him. And he was right. The statement emailed by committee spokeswoman Molly Block. We're talking about, what was it? The Rob Bishop's committee. I guess, the Natural Resources Subcommittee on the House side. The statement, emailed by committee spokeswoman Molly Block, didn't list the species or areas that Wood and Stiles referenced. Unlike fish and wildlife experts, neither of the witnesses are scientists who have expertise in animal habitat and the impacts of development on species. So the witnesses show up and say, we're not hurting anybody. In fact, we're helping species, and these regulations are needlessly getting in the way of our development. Really? The development of what? Mines. Well, who are you? I'm from the Hecla Mining Company in Idaho. Okay, so you're an actual mining company. You're mining now? Yes. So what are we getting in the way of? Well, we want to mine more. Well, sometimes you can mine more, and sometimes you can't mine more. That's the way business goes. What's your complaint? I don't know. But, of course, there were no experts there to counter any of this or say, no, we're not stopping you from anything. You applied for a new mining permit in January and you got it by March. What are you complaining about? That's information that you would need at a hearing and which Democrats can't get. With no experts present, Grijalva had no idea if these other guys' statements, which could influence future legislation, carried any truth. Is it true that the Endangered Species Act is responsible for an economic downturn, Grijalva asked? Or are they scapegoating the ESA with the intent to limit it or make it toothless? What's the reality? This limits our ability to counter those points because you don't have an agency there that has the information this decision should be based on. Let me take a look briefly at the ProPublica piece. Oh, it looks like it's a kind of a short piece with lots of comments after it. Don't read the comments. If we read the comments, we'd have a hell of a show there. Let's see. Oh, Rebecca Roman says, we have spare the air days in San Francisco. Yes, another place that you would have had that trouble. I mean, things still happen and we're always having to deal with the consequences of it. But my recollection of the, growing up in the 80s was that Los Angeles was just permanently smogged over. Although I guess it was probably on the upswing by the 80s a little bit. But certainly the late 70s and the malaise of the Jimmy Carter era, I was a big part of it. I mean, maybe I have it wrong. I don't know. But it seemed, I know we were never able to watch nesting eagles in urban environments before. Anyway, the ProPublica piece I'll turn to just for a second. Although I guess I'll observe this here. Oh, there's a lot of interesting things here, but let's see. Oh, okay. You know what? I'll go over to the ProPublica part here, though, and their piece, how the Trump administration responds to Democrats' demands for information. It doesn't. Largely the same story, but it's pretty short here. But here's some extra detail. When billionaire investor Wilbur Ross, remember that guy? He's the Secretary of Commerce, was going through the confirmation process to become President Trump's Commerce Secretary, Senate Democrats wanted answers about Ross's role as the vice chairman of the Bank of Cyprus, which has significant dealings with Russian oligarchs. Ooh, and I did read over the weekend that one of the investigative committees sent one of the members, a Republican member, to Cyprus to do a little poking around, and I never really got to that story. I'm not sure what they found out either. But anyway, they wanted to know about what was his role as the vice chairman of the Bank of Cyprus. I want to know. The administration's answer? Crickets. Ross's handlers had initially assured Commerce Committee staff that Ross would respond to their February 16th questions, according to a congressional staffer, but a response never came. You come before the committee. Should we confirm you? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, can you tell me about your role as vice chairman of the Bank of Cyprus? Well, I'll tell you what. Submit your questions in writing. I'll respond to all of them as thoroughly as possible. There's a lot of detail and a lot of records are going to have to be looked up. You know, you convince the committee that you can't give the responses off the cuff, which really you should, because it was about you. What did you do? I don't know. I'll have to check the record. I don't know. He's an old man. He's very busy. Maybe he has to check his records. Fine. February 16th, here they are. No answer. In the meantime, confirm me. You know, I can't do commercial things unless you confirm me, and you're embarrassing the president, and by God. Anyway, so they confirmed him, but he just doesn't answer. Just doesn't answer. And why should he? What are they going to do, impeach him? They should, but it's their only instrument, so they're not gonna. They're afraid of what it's going to look like, etc. And, of course, the Republicans are in control of the House, and they don't care. So, what else do we learn? No response ever shows up. The White House was sitting on Ross's written answers and refusing to hand them over. He answered, apparently, and the White House said, well, we're not going to give them to you. Wow. That's according to Senator Bill Nelson of Florida. He complained about it in a floor speech. It's behavior that everyone in this Senate should agree is unacceptable and should not be tolerated, Nelson said. And it shouldn't be tolerated, but what else are they going to do? The guys, they've confirmed him. They shouldn't have, but it wasn't up to them, and they did. Majority is in the hands of the Republicans. They confirmed him. He's just never going to answer, or the White House is never going to give you those answers. Senator Cory Booker and other senators sent 2 more letters. The administration still hasn't responded. A Commerce spokesman declined to answer our request for an explanation. The lack of response to congressional letters is part of a pattern. Virtually every day, Democrats write the Trump administration demanding answers on a range of issues, and every day they are met with the sounds of silence. The recent unanswered letters include a request from senators asking for details on Jared Kushner's conflicts of interest, another asking how agencies will implement Trump-ordered changes to Obamacare, and a third asking for details on officials the administration has quietly installed in so-called beachhead teams across the government, another great area of inquiry and about which I have a story that we still haven't gotten to. A recent informal audit by Representative John Sarbanes, that's the one we heard about half a month later from the Washington Post. We know all about that one. Sarbanes' spokesman said the audit found just a small handful of letters that did receive responses, such as one sent to the Federal Railroad Administration and another related to a pipeline issue. The reasons for lack of responses aren't clear. It could be another symptom of the president not filling top jobs across government. Trump, for example, hasn't nominated anyone for 12 out of the 13 Senate confirmable leadership posts at congressional affairs offices throughout the government, according to a Washington Post jobs tracker. The Department of Education and the Department of Defense, for example, both have open spots. Those offices handle congressional requests ranging from minor constituent issues to politically charged demands for documents. The White House did not respond to a request for comment about that. Same joke. Other jobs have also gone unfilled below the Senate-confirmed level. At the Department of Labor, for example, the Office of Congressional Affairs website previously listed around 15 politically appointed staffers. It now lists none. The agency didn't respond for a request for comment on that either. The lack of responses also shows a hard truth for Democrats. As the minority in both the House and the Senate, they have no clear authority to compel the Trump administration to answer questions or release documents. No ranking minority members or individual members can start official committee investigations, hold hearings, or issue subpoenas, notes a guide to investigations by Morton Rosenberg, a veteran staffer of the Congressional Research Service. It's difficult to compare Trump's record to that of the Obama administration since there's no hard data on responsiveness to congressional requests. It was just something you just did. Nobody counted how many times you didn't, because you did. But Republicans say Obama was less than responsive to their requests. It usually took months of persistence to get responses. Sometimes a response never came, and even when it did, the Obama administration rarely fully answered the questions, said Jill Gerber, a spokeswoman for Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa. While practices vary agency to agency, there's always been a pecking order in whose letters get quick responses, with subpoena-wielding committee chairs at the top and members of the president's party typically getting preference. Yet, at least some Obama-era congressional affairs offices had policies of responding to letters from any members of Congress. At the Labor Department, for example, there was a policy of providing a response to all letters from the Hill, regardless of the party who was asking, according to a former agency official who handled congressional affairs. But response times could take months, depending on the nature of the letter and whether, for example, a response needed to be approved by another agency. The GSA, which handles procurement for the government, general services, right, also had a policy of answering all correspondence for the Hill, regardless of party or the member it came from. According to a former agency official, the policy was to respond within 25 business days. So that'll give you some context for all of this. Another piece of context I would add to all this is that there's probably very little hope for that policy to change even when Democrats, or should Democrats, regain the majority. We learned most recently during the George W. Bush administration that Republicans' basic theory of governance is that the unitary executive, or unitary Republican executive anyway, just really isn't subject to much in the way of checks and balances from other branches of government. Yes, allegedly, Congress has oversight powers, but all their oversight powers ultimately is rooted in the impeachment power, which they're mostly paralyzed with fear about using. The politics, the optics of all of this, of impeachment is just too frightening. There are smaller scale weapons. We keep trying to point to those things and say, well, the power of the purse, the Congress can cut off funding or reduce funding as punishment for a lack of compliance, but that's a very indirect kind of punishment, and very often the punishment ends up falling on the taxpayers who are served by the agency supposedly being punished for noncompliance with congressional oversight, rather than on the non-compliant members of the administration, as should be the case. And so, there needed to be some design for a middle ground here that we don't have anything. You can sue in the courts and that sometimes sort things out, but with Congresses lasting only 2 years and most lawsuits lasting much longer than that, there's really just not a lot of really useful resources for members of Congress to enforce their oversight power on a reluctant executive branch. And so I said we learned this most recently in the George W. Bush administration. They made a practice of either non-response to certain types of inquiries or insistences that they would not honor subpoenas, congressional subpoenas passed by Democratic-controlled houses of Congress. They just weren't going to comply in some cases. Even right to, just to keep things in, say, Wilbur Ross's wheelhouse, now that he's Secretary of Commerce, and because he had such big mining interests, even at the time that this happened, when we had these various mining disasters, the Bureau of Mines people in the W administration very often just simply refused to show up for hearings, or they left when they felt like it. They get called for a hearing, and, sometimes these hearings are tedious and stupid, and sometimes it's a bunch of grandstanding and members of Congress asking the same question over and over again just so they can, generate videotape of themselves asking an important question, even if it's already been asked 10 times, so that the local television stations can carry a picture of them asking it, because who cares if the guy from the next state over or 10 states over asks it. So it's, it's understandable, if not exactly legitimate. But, they said, we'll stay for an hour. And then they just walked out on mine safety hearings in the middle of a mining disaster, or, after a mining disaster. It wasn't like they were going to solve a mining disaster or anything like that. They just didn't want to answer any annoying questions. But there was all sorts of issues on all sorts of, over a number of policy areas. It was a huge, huge issue. And, I don't know. It reminded me, I guess, from watching it happen in the Bush administration. I noticed, there was a huge pattern of similar behavior, from all across the Bush administration. As a matter of fact, who was really active in all this, and who I got to know as a result of this, was a former member of Congress from North Carolina, Brad Miller, who was chair of the Oversight Subcommittee on the House Science Committee, the investigative subcommittee. He was investigating, I don't even remember offhand what exactly he was investigating, but he ran into this real early, where they were looking for documents from, I don't know, one of the science agencies, or maybe even NASA, but and National Science Foundation. I don't remember what they were doing, but they were just getting flat no's. They would subpoena them for documents, and they'd still get a flat no. And in researching his options, he realizes, I can't impeach the president over this. No one's going to go for that. I can't even really impeach the agency head. Likely nobody's going to go for that either. What can I do in between here? What can I do that's directly related to the failure to comply with the subpoena? And in some cases, they said, well, what about contempt of Congress? And the problem they began running into there was the unitary executive thing. You say, well, I would like to bring charges of contempt of Congress against these people who are not complying with my subpoena. The problem is that statutory contempt of Congress is prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, who of course reports to the Attorney General, who of course reports to George Bush himself. And if your inquiry is rather too pointed for comfort for the White House, well, what if they simply don't? What if they simply refuse to prosecute or exercise prosecutorial discretion and say, we're not going to prosecute the statutory contempt of Congress charge for you? What do you do? Well, as it happens, that's where we discovered that the framers had, I guess, seen that one coming and had imbued Congress with an inherent contempt power. That is, contempt is contempt. The fact that it happened, you shouldn't have to depend on the executive branch to prosecute itself for that contempt. Congress should be able to do it all by itself, and in fact they can, and all it takes is a vote of the full chamber, and it's even something you can back up because the House of Representatives and Senate both have their own sergeant at arms and a police force, and they can actually say, if the executive branch won't take you to court on our behalf, we'll do it ourselves. We'll be our own court. We'll be our own police force. We can even put you in our own jail. And that seemed awfully crazy because it hadn't been done in some 70 plus years at the time it had come up. No, it was archaic. No one had ever threatened it in decades, almost 100 years since someone had even threatened it. And even before then, it was probably pretty rare. But it had happened. I mean, there was historical precedent for it, but it made everybody uncomfortable and nervous, and they were pretty sure that because it was so archaic, it couldn't work anymore. Like the 27th Amendment, another one of these areas where they told people just, that's archaic, it just won't work, and somebody else proved them wrong. Again, that comes to mind because that was something that I advocated at the time during the W administration and said, look, this power exists, use it. You should. Well, we're afraid of anything that smacks of overreach by Democrats. I understand they were worried about the optics, et cetera, but it does bring up a good point. Congress can be left without any serious alternative here. Now, I bring this all up again to make this point. When I was researching it in the early 2000s during the George W. Bush administration, right, I found the most recent political precedent, the historical precedent for this kind of proceeding one, for an administration simply refusing to comply with a congressional subpoena, and two, an administration further refusing to go ahead with, or at least threatening to refuse to go ahead with a prosecution for contempt of Congress. And it should surprise no one that in the George W. Bush administration, the nearest precedent for this was from the Ronald Reagan administration, the second to last previous Republican administration, basically. And it should surprise no one that it was over environmental issues as well, given how much we were just talking about Reagan and his contempt for those environmental issues, and the big turnaround that nonetheless was facilitated by previously existing environmental protection laws, finally resulting in what would no doubt have been a source of great pride to Ronald Reagan, nesting pairs of bald eagles in Washington, D.C. But anyway, the real point here is that the most celebrated case during the Reagan administration of an executive branch official refusing to comply with congressional subpoenas and facing the threat of a contempt of Congress charge and the possibility of a constitutional crisis of sorts if the executive branch were to decline to prosecute that charge on behalf of the Congress, involved the EPA administrator under the Reagan administration. And those of you who already know the story are like, get on with it already. Those of you who don't know the story are going to say, oh, God, I can't believe it. That's why you've been wasting all my time on this. But thank God you did. The EPA administrator was, at the time, Ann Gorsuch. Now, that's not a common name, necessarily. I wonder where it comes from. What sort of name is Gorsuch, anyway? Hey, any relation to the new Justice of the Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch? The answer, of course. Ann Gorsuch was Neil Gorsuch's mother. So, for those of you who never heard the story, I'll let Wikipedia tell you the basic sort of both sides-ish, less than entirely biased interpretation that I might give you. She was later known, by the way, after remarrying, as Ann Gorsuch Burford. She died, though, I believe, in 2004, for those of you wondering. But Ann, full name here because Wikipedia, Ann Irene McGill Gorsuch Burford, also known as Ann M. Gorsuch, was an American attorney and politician. You know how these generic descriptions go. Between 1981 and 1983, while known as Ann M. Gorsuch, she served under President Ronald Reagan as the first female administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. Would you like to know about her early life and career? No, not quite as important. Maybe how about early legal career and political career? Maybe not. That could have some interesting background. Look, here's something that caught my eye. Gorsuch first employed as an attorney with a bank trust department, then assistant district attorney for Jefferson County, Colorado, and as deputy district attorney for the city of Denver, Colorado, subsequently corporate attorney for Mountain Bell Telephone. 1975, elected to the Colorado House of Representatives. Served in office for two-year terms. Voted outstanding freshman legislator, but was considered by some to be a member of the, quote, House Crazies. Does that sound familiar? A group of conservative lawmakers intent on permanently changing government. What? Well, it's not her now involved in permanently changing government. It's her son. We've been doing it. We've been at that stupid experiment for that long. In 1980, Gorsuch served on President-elect Reagan's transition team, believe it or not, as a member of his advisory committee on intergovernmental relations. Shortly after Reagan was inaugurated, Gorsuch was nominated as lead administrator of the EPA. I assume that means lead, not lead administrator of the EPA. But hey, you never know over at the EPA. The nomination was unanimously confirmed by the Senate 3 months later on May 5th, 1981. So, as EPA administrator, Gorsuch based her administration of the EPA on the new federalism approach of downsizing federal agencies by delegating their functions and services to the individual states. I know. She believed that the EPA was over-regulating business, even back then, and that the agency was too large and not cost-effective. During her 22 months as agency head, she cut the budget of the EPA by 22%, reduced the number of cases filed against polluters, relaxed Clean Air Act regulations, and facilitated the spraying of restricted-use pesticides, thereby probably delaying the reappearance of nesting bald eagles in Washington, D.C. by some 5 to 10 years, I would guess, but I'm just pulling that one out of my whatever. She cut the total number of agency employees, hired staff from the industries they were supposed to be regulating. Environmentalists contend that her policies were designed to placate polluters and accused her of trying to dismantle the agency. Again, this is 1981. We've been at this a long time. There's a couple of controversies, I guess, listed here. There's first, the Thriftway Company became an issue. Thriftway, a small oil refinery in Farmington, New Mexico, asked Gorsuch for a meeting to discuss the regulations limiting lead content in gasoline. The program under Section 211 of the Clean Air Act, designed to reduce the amount of lead in gasoline in annual phases and to receive relief from the standard. In December 1981, while EPA was developing revisions to the regulations at the request of the Reagan administration, Gorsuch met with representatives from the company who asked her to excuse Thriftway from compliance with the lead limits because the company faced financial ruin if it could not obtain quick relief from the regulations. Gorsuch did not commit herself in writing, but she did tell them they could count on her promise as the word of the EPA administrator as word of that she would not enforce the regulations. Let's kill eagles in New Mexico because these guys can't keep up. What about this one here? Superfund. In 1982, Congress charged that the EPA had mishandled the $1.6 billion toxic waste Superfund and demanded records from Gorsuch. Gorsuch refused, this is obviously the one we're talking about here, and became the first agency director in U.S. history to be cited for contempt of Congress. Cited. Yes, that is to say, the Congress voted to cite her, but then what happened? The EPA ended up turning over the documents to Congress several months later after the White House abandoned its court claim that the documents could not be subpoenaed by Congress because they were covered by executive privilege. At that point, when the White House finally gave up the dumb idea that they were covered by executive privilege because they knew they would lose in court, Gorsuch resigned her post, citing pressures caused by the media, the damn media, and the congressional investigation. Then there's a section, of her EPA legacy, and you can imagine about what it might have been like. And I don't know if that necessarily touches on the conflict over the production of the documents. But what's really interesting, I think, in all of this is that still stood as precedent. And when they were dealing with the reluctant W administration folks, everybody said, well, even with Gorsuch, eventually it all worked itself out. The administration came to realize that they would lose in court on their claim of executive privilege, and they abandoned that claim and turned over the documents, and Gorsuch resigned. So all worked out in the end. But it was not clear at all that they had, that in the intervening years that Republicans would find themselves on even weaker ground. It actually looked a lot better for them somehow coming out of this one with their claims of executive privilege intact. And indeed, they did claim executive privilege over a lot of documents sought by congressional investigators. And I don't know that they ever likewise gave up and ended up turning them over, and that the people resigned. Now, I'm less clear on each of the individual examples, but there were many. What's so interesting now, of course, is recall that what ends up leading to the turning over the documents and the resignation of Gorsuch herself, in this case, is the White House's realization that they were wrong and could lose in court. This administration so far really hasn't had that sink in yet. Though they have been wrong and lost in court, I don't think that they have come to the realization that they could be wrong again and again and again and again and again, and they may never win, because a lot of their ideas are not only novel, but stupid and baseless as well. But they now have an ace up their sleeve. Ann Gorsuch's son occupies one of the 9 seats of the Supreme Court where such a question would now be decided. Does President Trump, or any president for that matter, have the ability to shield pretty much anything he wants from congressional oversight with a claim of executive privilege? Well, in 1981, it looked like they would lose that claim. In 2017, 2018, going forward, I'm not so sure that they do lose that claim, depending, I guess, on the nature of the document. Perhaps, if you need swing votes in order to help. But very interesting that we've now seated a justice of the Supreme Court who would have very clear memories, I would think, of his mother being hounded by Democrats in Congress who were just out for scoring political points, trying to force Saint President Ronald Reagan to turn over documents. And by God, the corrupt Democrats of yore were able to make this work, and to the everlasting shame of my mother. Well, it won't happen again, I can assure you of that. Well, I don't know whether that's necessarily the outcome of having seated Neil Gorsuch on the court, but it's a damn worrisome prospect. And I'm sure part of the reason that everybody on the Republican side is secretly celebrating, or even not so secretly celebrating, having seated Gorsuch. Not that we had to. We had a chance to do something about it, but nobody believed me. All right. Let's see. What else can we cram in here before wrapping things up? I thought it was a good exploration of issues back into the past. It always pays to give some context to some of these things. I know we've mentioned Gorsuch's history before, but felt like we would do better to put it all together that way. Let's see. Anything else that we wanted to include here? Oh, yes. Well, how about this one? This doesn't necessarily qualify as the story I would ordinarily have chosen to wrap up with, but you'll recall that we'll reward Armando today for his patience and forbearance, even though I would have been happy to have him call in and help me carry the show today. No pressure on you, obviously. You have plenty to do, and it seems like we entertained everybody pretty well for the 2 hours here. But you mentioned last week, I'm guessing, that you had seen an article about Richard Dearlove, the former MI6 intelligence chief over in the UK, who was theorizing aloud that Donald Trump had borrowed money, so much of it, from Russians during and after the 2008 financial crisis that he remained largely compromised by them. But you were issuing us this caution flag, and rightly so, that you had seen the story reported in The Sun, of which you were not a particular fan, The Sun being a tabloid paper from the UK that, I'd take it with a grain of salt, or 3 myself. Plus, of course, Louise Mensch being interested in it also adds an additional element of danger. So I thought I'd tell you that I have seen it reported by some more reputable papers. The Independent has a story on it. I thought I'd grab it and maybe we would introduce people to the details of that story via the Independent instead. This is, oh my goodness, Mithili Sampathkumar. Mithili Sampathkumar, my best guess at the name, writing for the Independent here. Days before taking office, Mr. Trump said Russia never had any leverage over him at all. But, yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. By the way, a couple days having passed, it should be noted alongside this story that Josh Marshall, among others, a little bit skeptical, taking, I think, an appropriately skeptical view of the ability of a former intelligence official to be that up to date on what's happening currently inside the intelligence community, though he does concede that they do tend to stay rather more connected than perhaps other former officials. Anyway, the former head of MI6 said Donald Trump borrowed money from Russia for his businesses during the 2008 financial crisis. Richard Dearlove told Prospect magazine, quote, what lingers for Trump may be what deals and on what terms he did after the financial crisis of 2008 to borrow Russian money when other banks and lenders would not risk the money, given Mr. Trump's history of bankruptcy. Yeah, they remembered. We didn't, I guess. Mr. Dearlove alleged the money was used by Mr. Trump to prop up his real estate empire, which was hit hard by the financial crisis. It's not illegal to borrow money from Russian entities, but Mr. Dearlove, who left government in 2004, did not provide any evidence to support his claim in the interview. And that is a recurring problem these days, isn't it? Just before taking office, Mr. Trump tweeted that Russia has never had any, quote, leverage over him. The tweet, of course, from January 11th saying, Russia has never tried to use leverage over me. I have nothing to do with Russia. No deals, no loans, no nothing. Of course, that's a different thing, isn't it? It's you don't have any leverage over me versus Russia has never tried to use leverage over me. Yeah. But probably a small and insignificant point. Mr. Trump also recently said U.S.-Russia relations may be at an all-time low following the U.S. airstrike in Russian-allied Syria after a chemical attack in the Idlib province. Only the UK papers bother to tell us what province the bombing was in, by the way. The chemical attack, rather. Robert Amsterdam, a lawyer at international law firm Amsterdam & Partners with considerable experience in Russian affairs, told The Independent there was no question that U.S. intelligence agencies and the FBI had information about Trump's financial dealings with Russian entities prior to the 2016 election. Trump's relationship with Russia goes back many, many years. I'm sure the FBI was monitoring it, he said. 2 parallel investigations into alleged ties between Trump's associates and Russia during the presidential election, as well as Russia's alleged tampering with the election, are being conducted in Congress at the moment. Democratic Senator Mark Warner, vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said the tactics used by the Kremlin, quote, send a chill down anyone's spine, he didn't say, who believes in the democratic process. Luckily, Republicans don't believe in the democratic process, so they're clear on this. We found that out last night in a yet unmentioned story about the outcome of the referendum election in Turkey, which, as I understand it, has given broad new, nearly dictatorial powers to their president, and a move somehow applauded here by the Trump administration, which, of course, you ordinarily would not see because usually presidents, this one's not normal. Normal presidents are encouraged only by the spread of democracy, not by its death in other countries. And, you don't applaud the authoritarian death of democracy in a majority Muslim country very lightly, I don't think. But hey, it's Trump. Anyway, if the FBI, the article continues, or other U.S. intelligence agencies did know about any financial burden Mr. Trump had with Russian lenders, it will raise further questions over why the information was not released earlier, especially given the FBI's approach to Mr. Trump's opposition candidate, Hillary Clinton, in the 2016 election. We all know about James Comey and what he did there. Mr. Amsterdam said one possible explanation for what they did was that the FBI has an informer who was once part of the Trump organization. and that information was not released in order to protect that source. It's a theory. In my view, the FBI had no obligation to share the Trump investigation, but the same rules should have applied to Hillary Clinton as Donald Trump, he said. Mr. Amsterdam explained that Russian authorities likely have the same, if not better, information about Trump's financial dealings with Russian entities. One of Trump's main lenders is a bank that has been particularly close with the Russians. Deutsche Bank, said Mr. Amsterdam. That's in fact the only bank that would lend to him. Seems they do a lot of business with the Russians too. It's unknown if Trump is still paying off the alleged 2008 debts to Russian lenders or which part of the vast Trump organization took out the loans. The congressional investigations will also include interviews and possibly hearings with Jared Kushner. It has been confirmed that Vnesheconombank, a Russian state development bank, met with Mr. Kushner in December of 2016. The bank is currently subject to Western economic sanctions due to Russia's incursion into Ukraine, which they never did, by the way. They're not in Ukraine. I don't think you all understand that. You remember when he was actually contending that that was the case? The good old days before he was elected president, allegedly. Oh, well. Okay, so that's about all we can fit into today's show. Plenty more where that came from, of course. But tomorrow being Wednesday, we're chock full of our usual guests, thankfully. And they'll help us steer the show instead. Greg Dworkin will be with us first thing in the morning. And Joan McCarter, our senior political writer, joining us in the second hour to update us on the fact that nothing is going on in Congress. And it's a good thing, too. And, of course, looking ahead to when they do return and screw everything up. Plus, much, much more, of course. And then, of course, for all the stories we haven't been able to get to today and all the stories we won't be able to get to tomorrow, we have this little thing we call the after show, the responsibility of which to my show is non-existent. They're, of course, able to cover just about anything that they care to cover. They're not tied to my agenda at all, but they happen to end up batting cleanup for us almost every day because I get distracted about other things I want to tell you about, like Ann Gorsuch. But it makes for good radio, and I'm glad they tolerate it over there. What are they going to tell you about today on the Tuesday edition of the After Show? Here's what's on tap. Federal investigators know Trump has deep links to organized crime, and the public is just now catching up. I'd like to hear about that. The feisty group of Wells Fargo employees who exposed the bank's wrongdoing are virtually ignored by the media. So they are. I agree with that. Let's find out more about them. And America's manufactured amnesia puts everyone in peril, whoever they are. I can't even remember who everyone is. What were we talking about again? Ah, yes, the last half. That comes up next. They'll be visiting with Chris Reeves, who I can't remember who he is. It says here, a.k.a. Tom Servo 433, but my amnesia, damn it. They'll be talking about and conducting a follow-up on the Kansas 04 election. That would be the congressional district. Along with an update on today's Georgia special election, which I have completely ignored. Unbelievable. You know, I can't change the outcome. And another hospital prepares to close in Kansas. And Chris Kobach is ordered by a federal judge to turn over the immigration documents that he shared with the White House. About time.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you for listening, and again, do stay tuned for the after show. All of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Kos Community Calendar and more on the after show coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. Wink and Justice are your hosts for that. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories. Joan McCarter and Greg Dworkin, as usual. We'll see you on Wednesday.